Yeah, no, that was still, though. You know what I'm saying, man. We just can't let any person in here. If you want to be exclusive, you got to exclude people.
So this year, in 2025 of Black History Month, it is time that truth is brought to the light and the enemy is exposed. There is history in the Black community that many are just not aware of, and yet the whole community is influenced by these people. There is a difficult subject that needs to be spoken about while I'm still able to. For the most part, if you watch my videos or are slightly aware of the lies to this world that we're born into, then secret societies are not a big shocker to you. And if you understand that, you know that we can mostly correlate a majority of agendas going on in this world with the different secret societies. Some are very well known and heard of, like the Freemasons or Skull and Bones, though we don't know a great deal about them besides what they allow others to know or what insiders have revealed and exposed. But there are many others, some that are high up in the food chain or hierarchy of dominance, that are not even known by the majority. Most people have never even heard of them, though they have yielded a great deal of influence. And this topic that I'm about to discuss will discuss one of the least known societies. And though in the grand hierarchy of this pyramid, they are not very high in importance in this world, but in the Black community in America, they are extremely high in the pyramid. And most people have never even heard of them. They are the gatekeepers of the Black community, and if you do not understand them, you will have so many false beliefs and attitudes of Black America, our struggle, civil rights, and many other subjects that will not be corrected if they are not understood. Now, this is not a racial issue. Regardless of your race, you must understand this group because they have been used secretly against the population. If you were one that was influenced by the civil rights agenda, you were directly influenced by this organization. Yes, their spirit influence and their target market, it was and is the Black community in America, possibly around the world, though I would admit that my research hasn't taken me that far yet. But if you're paying attention to the agendas being carried out today, you will be able to see that this is an understanding that everyone should have. Whoever you are, you have to understand this group. You must understand the Black Boule. Let's begin. Okay, so I've desired to bring this topic back out for a while now. But in bringing these topics out, just like anything, it's important to have a strong foundation first in other topics. Like, you can't talk about the Boule without understanding Prince Hall Freemasonry, which is why I made that video first. And then you really can't understand the Divine Nine without understanding Prince Hall Freemasonry and the Boule. This information must be understood and peeled back in layers. So in the way that I teach, information comes out in a specific order in order that confusion can be limited. So if you have not watched the one about Prince Hall Freemasonry, please watch that one first, because if you don't watch that, there may be information you are missing that doesn't completely allow you to connect all the dots that are about to be presented in this video. Now, before I get into the breakdown of what the Black Boule is, we need to go back in time. Let's go back to the times of slavery. During the times of slavery, we had plantations. This was large farms in the colonies of America that used the enforced labor of slaves to harvest crops like cotton, rice, indigo, sugar, tobacco, and other farm produce for trade and export around the world. This trade and export was how America was built. On this plantation, we had two different classes or groups of people. We had the masters and the slaves. There was no crossing between these classes. A master never became a slave, and a slave never became a master. Well, that's not entirely true. Eventually, there were slaves that became slave owners, but I don't want to get off point. I'm not going to talk much about the masters, but more about the slaves. To keep the slaves in line and know exactly what the slaves were thinking or plotting, the masters, they needed help. They needed allies within the slaves. So in the slave class, there was two other classes that were created. There were the regular slaves and then the house slaves. The house Negroes, which really is known by another word that I will not use. The house slaves were taken in the house, given better food and accommodations. They were treated better and were more aligned with the slave masters than they were with their own people. They were used by the slave masters to keep the slaves in line. The slave masters might not have been able to keep the slaves in line without the house slaves. It even became a goal for some of the slaves to be able to come inside and become house slaves themselves. Now, on top of that, the slave masters would also have babies with the house slaves. Those children would never be equal, but they were not the bottom class slaves that had nothing and had to work outside eating the scraps. I think you get the picture. And I think, for the most part, everyone should understand what the house slaves were. Now, here's the question I want you to think about. After slavery, and after they reprogrammed the slaves to believe that they were free, do you think that the position of house slave went away? Do you think that slave masters, those that were running and building this country, do you think that they did away with this house slave position that allowed them to keep tabs and control of the Negro community by just controlling a small few of them? The answer should be no. But here's the problem. Whether you ever thought about that question or not, you probably have not been exposed to the how. You might just call out a few names that you've seen on television that were obviously cooning and say that's what a modern house slave is. But you probably still have not been fully exposed to the real answer. And that's what we're going to talk about. Here's the irony, though, in obvious reprogramming of today. During the times of slavery, though there were a few slaves that wanted to become house slaves, the majority of the slaves, they despised the house slaves. They did not trust them or like them. Fast forward to our current modern times. Today, we praise the house slaves, and they are now our heroes. It's because we have been reprogrammed and reconditioned to love and accept our chains. And our goals are now to get in the house instead of breaking free. Now, if you watched the video that broke down Prince Hall Freemasonry, you already have a good understanding of how the separation began and was started. But it did not stop at Prince Hall Freemasonry. Within the ranks of the Masons were an educated, bourgeois class of black men that looked at themselves as elite compared to the rest of the other Masons. They wanted to be separated and distinguished from all the other Masons. And the ruling class of America, the elite families that are still the unseen hand of this world, they needed a source of recruitable Negroes to assist them with their plan to assimilate the Negroes into this new world that they were building. So there was a new subsection of the underground world of Negroes that was made to be the gatekeepers of Black America. On their website, they say this about themselves. Sigma Pi Phi fraternity is also known as the Boule, which in ancient Greece was a council of chiefs. The meaning of the words Sigma Pi Phi, the titles given to its members and their wives, its officers, and the names of its local units are derived from Greek history and tradition as well. In its early years, Sigma Pi Phi could be viewed as a secret organization that consciously avoided publicity. It was not until 1982 that the fraternity adopted a policy of limited and selected publicity. Although no longer secret, today it can be described as a fraternity that exists with little fanfare and one that actively seeks to improve the lives of the citizens in the communities in which members are associated through its social action and public policy programs and initiatives. From its founding in 1904 with 6 members in the city of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Sigma Pi Phi fraternity has deliberately grown slowly, as the emphasis has always been on quality and not quantity. Yet, it currently has nearly 5,000 active members who are affiliated with 134 member boules in cities across the breadth of this nation and in Nassau, the Bahamas, and London, the United Kingdom. It has welcomed and continues to welcome into its fraternal bond some of the most distinguished men in the world. Its members have included such men as W.E.B. Du Bois, Carter G. Woodson, Martin Luther King Jr., Benjamin E. Mays, Ralph J. Bunche, James Weldon Johnson, Charles R. Drew, Daniel Hale Williams, Percy L. Julian, Charles H. Wesley, Oliver W. Hill, Paul R. Williams, John Hope Franklin, A. Leon Higginbotham, Ulysses K., Arna Bontemps, Arthur Ashe, David H. Blackwell, Robert C. Weaver, Ronald H. Brown, and the list goes on and on. Its past as well as its present members have been and are leaders in the struggle for civil rights, social justice, economic and educational equality, and in the implementation of public policy and healthcare initiatives that aid our underserved communities. Okay, now they have apparently taken it off their website, but in Boule member Charles Wesley's book, History of Sigma Pi Phi, a book I will be quoting from often in this video, when speaking about the founder Henry Minton, who I will speak on more briefly as well, Wesley writes this about Minton. His dream and ambition were to organize a Greek letter fraternity and to have its members not to be selected on the basis of brains alone, but in addition to congeniality, culture, and good fellowship, that they should have behind them a record of accomplishment, not merely be men of promise and good education. In summary, Minton wanted to create an organization which would partake, in his own words, of the tenets of Skull and Bones at Yale and Phi Beta Kappa. Now, you can see now in the age of information why they would want that removed from their website. If you remember Skull and Bones from George Bush, where both him and John Kerry were in the same secret society, but could not tell us anything about it.
You were both in Skull and Bones, the secret society.
It's so secret we can't talk about it.
What does that mean for America? The conspiracy theorists are going to go
I'm
wild.
sure they are. I don't know. I haven't seen the web.
Number 322?
First of all, he's not the nominee. And, look, I look
Are
forward...
you prepared to lose?
No, I'm not going to lose.
You both were members of Skull and Bones, a secret society at Yale. What does that tell us?
Not much, because it's a secret.
Yeah. Wikipedia says this about the secret society. Skull and Bones, also known as the Order 322, or the Brotherhood of Death, is an undergraduate senior secret student society at Yale University in New Haven, Connecticut. It is one of the big three societies at Yale, the other two being Scroll and Key and Wolf's Head Society. Yeah. Now, we don't need to know much more, but understanding the underworkings of this world, it says a lot that the Boule wanted to create an organization that partakes in the tenets of the Brotherhood of Death. Now, we also know that Phi Beta Kappa, who he also wanted to mirror his organization after, this is a Masonic organization, and I will revisit that info as I deal with the Divine Nine. But let's continue to focus on the Boule. You see, everyone has heard of the Alphas, the Kappas, the Omegas, the Sigmas, the Deltas, AKAs, etc., especially if you went to an HBCU like I did. But one thing that is not spoken of is the first Black Greek letter fraternity. Across America's colleges, when at the time you can say that they were predominantly white institutions of higher learning, these institutions had their Greek college fraternal organizations in much earlier periods. The organizations like Phi Beta Kappa were very early started in the higher learning institutions of America. But in the Black community, these organizations, these Greek letter organizations, were not undertaken until after the 1900s. Now, if you hear people speak of their fraternities, they love to talk about the history and how old it was. But the one thing that's not spoken on is if these people were just freed only 40 years before their organization was created, where did they get this knowledge of Greek letter fraternities from? It's obviously not original and was emulated from organizations that came before them. Organizations that actually held membership of some of the same exact people that once enslaved them. Where do you think your Greek fraternity influence comes from? But we can talk about that later. Let's talk some more history. Bear with me, please. Sigma Pi Phi was the first Black Greek letter fraternity before all the more widely known Divine Nine fraternities in the Black community was created. Now, the Black man at this time was on the rise, due mainly to the rise of Prince Hall Freemasonry, which was discussed in the previous video. During the beginning of the 20th century, in the early 1900s, there were established Negro professionals. By the beginning of the year 1900, the total number of Negro college graduates had been increased to 7,488. The majority of this group had come from Southern colleges, although there was an important minority who had graduated from Northern colleges. After these men who held bachelor's degrees, the number of graduate and professional degrees was relatively much smaller. The census of 1900 showed that the Negro population was steadily building an improved economic, educational, and social status. One of the areas that this improved status was improving was in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. If you remember in the last video, I told you to remember this city. This was the city that saw the second or third Prince Hall Masonic Lodge created in the country. Anyways, the city of Philadelphia ranked high in the list of those giving work opportunities to the Negro population. Remember, Pennsylvania was a northern state, and the proportion of free blacks in Philadelphia before the Civil War was greater than in any other city in the North. In 1900, there was in a single ward of Philadelphia 7 teachers, 5 lawyers, 6 physicians, 22 clergymen, and 3 dentists. This is not normal for the Black community. There were 3 major socioeconomic Negro groups in Philly. The first was the small group of professional persons who were the physicians, the dentists, lawyers, teachers, pastors, executives of business enterprises. A second group included the skilled and semi-skilled industrial workers and a large number of domestic servants. And the third group was the vast majority, and they comprised of the class that was considered unskilled laborers who were in poverty and low-income living in the congested areas of the city, what we call ghettos. Here's an important point that Wesley notes in his book. The lives of most of the two latter groups revolved around the church, the lodge, and the beneficial society. He says, during the last decade of the 19th century, there were 19 lodges of Masons, 6 chapters of the Eastern Star, 5 commanderies, 3 of the Scottish Rite, and 1 drill corps. There were lodges of the Knights of Pythias, Oddfellows, Galilean fishermen, and other important organizations based upon fraternal ties. Churches, they had been organized and have flourishing memberships, and were influencing the people in the development of self-respect and self-support, same way they do right now. The churches and lodges had property valued at over $1 million at that time. If you remember from the last video, Prince Hall Freemason Richard Allen created the AME Church in Philadelphia. So I gave you all that information so you can understand what the times were like. It's important to understand this. Henry M. Minton, founder of Sigma Pi Phi, was educated and a professional. He had the first drugstore operated by Negroes in Philadelphia. He later became a doctor, graduating from Jefferson Medical College. There were Greek letter fraternities in the institutions which he had attended, but Negroes were excluded from their membership. At that time, no Greek letter fraternity had been organized by Negroes. Minton's ambition drove him to take leadership in the creation of a fraternity among men of like ideals and attributes, and to build an affiliation of selected college men who had made achievements in their careers and their community. And this is when Sigma Pi Phi was created. Now, the other Black Greek organizations, the Divine Nine, they were created shortly after. They were catered to mostly undergrads, those obtaining bachelor's degrees. But Sigma Pi Phi, the oldest of all the Greek organizations, it catered to the men in their post-college years. This fraternity was planned for men who were graduates of college and were engaged in professional activities in their communities. Meaning, you wouldn't be able to join this organization while you were in college. You need to establish yourself and show that you are worthy to be a part of their organization. In Minton's words, there were many men in the community of good training, intelligence, and culture and congeniality who were not intimately acquainted with one another. For the good of themselves and the community, they should be gathered together in some kind of organization. Put very simply, these men, they served themselves. They were doing their thing in the community, and they wanted to bring them all together so that they could all work together for a common goal. It's a common idea in the Black community that many of us are like crabs in a barrel. No one can rise because we're always pulling each other down. These men should be credited with the creation of that condition in our community. But I digress. The historic birth of Sigma Pi Phi is May 15th, 1904. This is their Founders Day. It was at this time the concept of Boule was formed. Boule, also known as the Council of the Chiefs, the leading noblemen, or the heads of families. The Boule of Homeric times was a body of princes who were advisory to the king. This goes back to the Greeks, just like Christianity does. You see, a question we should ask ourselves is, who were they councils and advisors to? Who were these Boules councils to? History will show and prove that they were the advisors of dealing with and keeping the Black community in check. Again, they were the house slaves. Another word used more generally than Boule was the word archon. They say this designation was a title given to the highest magistrate in Athens and many ancient Greek states. But in a simple search, like in the Britannica, you can see that in Gnosticism, archons are actually more likely demons, fallen angels that are servants to the demiurge, Satan. The archons are tyrannical and limiting agencies who rule over humanity and creation in order to enhance their own self-importance and glory. That's what they are. So the name is fitting on why they call themselves this, but they do not rule over humanity, just over the Black community in America. Now, their books do not mention that they took orders from others in higher positions that were not necessarily in their community of race, But if you understand the underworld, you understand how this all was. They say they wanted to be like Skull and Bones and Phi Beta Kappa. And those societies all were under the leadership of the family of bloodlines that held power over centuries. Now, at this point, I will stop with the history. If you want to know more about them, they are an important subject you should know and research. Charles Wesley, who himself is a Boule member and a Freemason, he has wrote a lot about them, and in his books, you can understand more about the organization. I want you to ask a majority of your parents, your grandparents, ask them about Sigma Pi Phi or the Boule, and I guarantee a majority of them would not know of them. They made sure that they were very secretive and under the radar, but yet they were very much present in our society. They were the actual gatekeepers of the Black community, and the heights of success that we see in America today in the Black community would not and did not happen without them. And this is the crazy part. Remember how I talked about how nobody wanted to be the house slave back then? Today, they are what we ultimately decide what our life goals should be like. Because of their power, their success, them being praised by the business leaders and the government leaders and all these other people, them having the fame and the fortune, they have made it that we desire to be like them. You see, when money, power, fame, and wealth are the primary drivers of our lives, it's very easy to implant those who have been given keys to the kingdom as being our examples and who we should be like. Now, here's the thing. Early on, these men were included not only by their status and by their success, but by their skin tone. Many of these men could also pass for white men, which made them able to be accepted easier amongst those in control. They passed those paper bag tests, and they were many of them descendants of the slave owners themselves. These are the founders. These were the men given the brown paper bag test, which they passed, and this is how they obtained power and then later controlled the power as it was passed down. This is all very deep. The white ruling class of this country allowed them to be very rich and offered them opportunities of education and status, which carried with it the tradition of the Western Eastern American civilization. Basically, when they freed the Negroes, they needed a way to draw them into American culture instead of allowing them to create their own thing in America, which is what the Black community tried to do, which is why it always got stomped out. So after the white ruling class of this country gained backing in the Black community through their Masonic fraternal organizations, creating these house slaves, they then got pickier and chose the ones that were going to be the examples for the Black community to try to eventually emulate and bring us into them. And after these men were created and solidified, then they created a civil rights campaign that teaches the Black community to assimilate just like those men instead of us being set apart and doing our own thing. The goal was always to assimilate us after they had control of our minds. They used these Boule members in many different ways. They had many different roles. One of the first elite members of the Boule was W.E.B. Du Bois, and he's quoted as saying, "The Boule was to keep the professional Blacks away from Garvey." Marcus Garvey, also another Freemason, he started the grass movement. His idea was to make America start a settlement in Liberia to control rubber crops and other natural resources. Garvey's famous quote was, "Why should not Africa give to the world its Black Rockefeller, Rothschild, and Henry Ford? Now is the opportunity. Now is the chance for every Negro to make effort toward a commercial, industrial standard that will make us comparable with the successful businessmen of other races." Around 1918, in the early stages of the Boule, Garvey's Back to Africa movement, through his newspaper, The Negro World, it was reaching over 1 million diasporic Africans, largely in North America, without TV or without radio. So with the Boule, Du Bois was tasked with stealing the Black professionals from the influence of Garvey because, in short, it went against the ultimate agenda. So Du Bois established his Boule chapter in New York, and the rise of Black civic organizations happened like the NAACP, the Urban League, and the 100 Black Men. This man was used to push the agenda that the white ruling class of the Masons, they really wanted. The main point I'm making is that this elite class of Black men who were extremely picky about who they included did not do their own bidding. They were sold out to the satanic elite class that were already controlling America. And they were the house Negroes that regulated the Black community all the way until we are now at the time when they are our heroes, yet we know nothing about their organization and the roles that they have played in our society. Understand it like this. Those who secretly ran this country did not want the black community to turn to the Most High, so they controlled their goals and the agendas that they had. Later, moving us to the Civil Rights Movement, where Boule member Michael King, mostly widely known as Martin Luther King Jr., he helped bring the final jab and exclamation point to their agenda of assimilation. And we have been unknowingly following their agenda and influence ever since. So here's the question. Why don't your parents and grandparents know much about them? Well, it's simple. They were hidden in the past. But in 1982, like I read earlier, the fraternity adopted a policy of limited and selected publicity. But they were still widely a secret to many. They have a website, though, and are hidden right in plain sight. The Divine Nine, the other Black Greek letter organizations that followed after, became their tools of recruitment. And so you normally would not see a member of the Boule that is not a member of these fraternities and sororities. Those members of the Divine Nine, they are just a low-hanging fruit, and most don't even know it or understand any of it. But that needs to be discussed as well. Some of the most notable members of the Boule are, like I've already noted, Michael King, W.E.B. Du Bois, Thurgood Marshall, Jesse Jackson, Bill Cosby, Tom Joyner, Arthur Ashe, Eric Holder, John Lewis, Kwesi Mfume, Robert Johnson, founder of BET. I mean, there are many names. On their website, they say, its past as well as its present members have been and are leaders in the struggle for civil rights, social justice, economic and educational equality, and in the implementation of public policy and healthcare initiatives that aid our underserved communities. Each member is committed to upholding the principles upon which the fraternity was founded, and thereby enriching the lives of our citizens. Each member strives to enhance the brilliance of its beacon light. Its over 100-year history is a testament to determination, dedication, and a commitment to excellence. You see, for me, my rule of thumb is anywhere that there are prominent Black professionals, chances are they're in the Boule. And then what I do is I look to see if they're part of a Greek letter fraternity, and if they are, I pay closer attention to what they're saying and what they're doing, just so I know what their agendas are. These people are very secret, so everyone attached is not known. But they are, in fact, the true gatekeepers of Black America, and they should never be ignored. Here's an activity. Anytime you see a prominent Black person in business or politics or religion anywhere, look to see if they're a member of a Divine Nine fraternity. If you remember when Kamala was being propped up, it was most of her Divine Nine people that were propping her up in the first place. When you understand this, you can always see that these figures have a door of control that was always opened. You see, the power structure of this world is right in our faces, and what they want us to do is ignore it and act like it's all coincidence. Listen, it's at this time they were about to enter into their new world that these groups pledged themselves to help promote, and they help set the stage for. It is at this time that they must be understood and their influence examined if you are trying to remove yourself from the influence of this world. Now, it's important that you know and understand this is nothing that you can stop or that you can change. This is not information for us to stop their organizations or those like them. The main part of this understanding is to see how controlled this world is and understand why it is necessary to be set apart from it. When you're following these people, you're following all these lies that these people are doing in their secret societies that they're not telling you, but they're attaching you to it in some way. When you understand this, you can understand the agendas like the Civil Rights Movement, which was not actually about equal rights, but tying Negroes to the judgment that is set aside for this nation. When you understand this, you can understand when pastors like Jamal Bryant are using the pulpit to boycott Target. Like, why is he wasting his time with a message like this? You see, they're all being used for agendas that are used to bring the world to the acceptance of the beast, and the Negro community is very much important for many different reasons. But these Negroes are house slaves that are being used to tie us with them. I'm confident that if you're not a believer or strong in your belief, you may likely say, so what am I supposed to do with this information? But the answer is very simple for a true believer in Yahusha, the Messiah. The reason it's simple is because it's something we should do regardless if you know this information or not. And that is that we must be holy and set apart. I'm just showing you this information to really show you how much of this world you need to reject and why you should be rejecting it. I've been making videos trying to display how tainted this world really is. For my earlier videos about the symbols, you should see how many satanic symbols are lingering in our society. When exposing the matrix, it should be easy to see how much control these people have had over our world. When understanding mind control, you should be able to see how they have been directing us for decades. I want you to understand how deep all this goes, because for most of us, we can pinpoint exactly where in time we were sucked into this world and its agenda. And most of the time, it links back to these men and these organizations. The goal is to show you how polluted this world really is and how little control you have had in it. We have been guided and we have been directed to believe in and take part in a system that we have been manipulated to accept. They have given us heroes that were in secret actually our enemies, and they have made our enemies out of people that were actually our heroes. They have been working and guiding us into accepting their coming new world order and their false messiah. And if we don't want to feel the ultimate consequence of following them down this broad path that leads to destruction, you need to come out of Babylon and be separate. When I have said I don't vote, people used to come against me, not understanding how deep these people were in the system that were trying to steer us. I don't care about the system.
In my hospital room and said, John, don't worry, we will make it from Selma to Montgomery and the Voting Rights Act will be passed.
Because it's all controlled by puppets. You'll hear many older generations like the baby boomers, they'll say they still participate and vote in this system because the older generations fought for this right. But the truth is that after you do the research, you should see that our older generations were just manipulated by these same groups of people that they did not even know existed. And me not participating is me trying to remove my blood from their iniquities. In his epistle, the Apostle Paul writes, "Do not be unequally yoked together with unbelievers. For what fellowship has righteousness with lawlessness? And what communion has light with darkness?" That's 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 14. You see, these people are unbelievers. They are knowingly working for the enemy of our faith. They are agents of darkness masquerading as agents of light. They are promoters of lawlessness. We should not be in communion with them. We should not be steered by them. But sometimes it's hard for this mentality to be understood if you have not been really exposed to this information. But in this time, before the wheat are separated from the tares, Father is giving us all a chance to repent and choose our side that we're going to be on. And he is allowing you to be informed of what is being done in the darkness so you can make a solid decision. But in the end, it's up for you to choose. If we say that we have fellowship with him and walk in darkness, we lie and do not practice the truth. But if we walk in the light as he is in the light, we have fellowship with one another. And the blood of Yahushua the Messiah, his son, cleanses us from all sin. 1 John chapter 1, verses 6 and 7. You see, much of what we do and how we live today has been manipulated by agents of darkness, promoting their God of this world to us. Just because there are things that's labeled a black agenda, that doesn't mean that it's actually good for you. Just because we were slaves and treated as 3/5 of a person does not mean that we must seek equality from these same people who did the oppressing. The only reason they have been showing another side and trying to draw us in is because they want to tie us to their fate. This is not a black or white issue, though this agenda has been heavily marketed to the black community. This is a very spiritual issue that has been masqueraded and identified by Satan through race, but it's so much deeper than skin color. That's another subject. The bottom line is that you need to make a decision on whose path that you're on. Whose agenda are you fighting for and following? There is a civil rights agenda that is on par with Michael King's dream, and that dream is tied to the promised land of a new world to come. And there is an actual promise of our Father in heaven to be in his kingdom and to be in full fellowship with him as he establishes his kingdom on earth and takes away all unrighteousness on this earth when he restores his people back to his land. These organizations have been acting like we are all on the same goal when we're not. There are two paths in the road, and you need to decide which one you're going down. This information was given to you so you can see what has been hidden from you. In the end, it is up to you, the path that you choose. It is time to get on the narrow path and follow our Savior and not be steered by this world. It's time for you to choose, though. What will you choose? Make sure you choose our Father in heaven and be ready for him, because the time is almost up on all these lies and the illusions. Serve our Father Yahuwah today and believe in his son Yahushua the Messiah. Come out of Babylon today, all of her ways and all of her mindsets. Come out of her and be redeemed. The time for your decision is now. Be blessed. Hallelujah. Praise Yah. Okay, thanks again for watching. If this has blessed you, please don't forget to like this and share this with others. If you have not done so already, please don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Yah willing, I upload every Friday. Also, don't forget to follow this ministry on Facebook and Instagram, as well as on my website, truthunedited.com. As always, I really like to thank all those who support this ministry. You know who you are. Your contributions have been an extreme blessing to this ministry, and I'm very thankful for you. Thank you for being a blessing and all your continued support to this mission. Be blessed. Okay, thanks again for watching, everyone. I love you all.